Hello, my name is Dr. Luke Bell. I'm lecturer in molecular horticulture at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. This is a screencast of material originally made available for the module Principles of Horticulture and Crop Production from the years 2020 to 2025. Please note that some of the details may now be outdated.
So learning outcomes are to describe the main characteristics of cabbage crops and their optimal growth conditions, give examples of heading types of cabbage, understand the key nutrient and irrigation requirements of cabbage crops, and describe how cabbages are harvested and stored, and give an example of their culinary use. So in terms of the botany of cabbages, they're part of the group called Capitata. So you'll often see in books the species and the variety of a Brassica oleracea crop as Brassica oleracea variety Capitata. So that name denotes its kind of morphology, and Capitata means head in Latin. So it refers to the shape of the structure which forms as part of the cabbage. So the terminal buds of the cabbage plant forms a head of overlapping leaves on a short and unbranched stem. So the plants are quite squat and close to the ground during their developmental stage. So cabbages are cool season crops, and which they're generally quite frost tolerant. It's grown across many different regions and will tolerate temperate and subtropical regions quite well. Cabbage is biennial and grows best at around temperatures of 15 to 18 degrees centigrade, but crops generally grow poorly at temperatures above 24 degrees C. Seedlings are more tolerant to heat and heat stress than adult plants. Hardened plants can generally withstand temperatures as low as -7, so hardening means that they've been gradually exposed to outdoor and cold conditions, which makes them more robust and are able to withstand harsher and colder temperatures better. The leaves generally develop with a high dry matter content, which again protects them from frost damage, but they also have quite a waxy cuticle or kind of surface to the leaves, which again helps prevent frost damage. Exposure to temperatures between about 2 and 10 degrees centigrade initiates a property of the plants called vernalization, and a lot of different plants have this property, but it's quite important when it comes to the production of different brassica crops. So in the next couple of screencasts on broccoli and cauliflower, it's especially important. But in cabbages, this is a problem because exposure to cold and the vernalization process initiates a flowering response. So if plants are exposed to cold and then grown on for too long, the head of the cabbage will develop into flowering tissues, and so that's obviously not very good for harvesting and creating an edible product. So it's important that early cabbages must be harvested at the appropriate time to avoid this transition into the reproductive phase, where the marketable part of the crop would be ruined. So like all brassica crops, there's a high level of diversity present within the variety. So in this slide you can see a quartered red cabbage, so there's a lot of different colour variation with cabbages, but also the size and shape and texture of the leaves. There's also a lot of diversity in terms of their disease resistance and also in the different types of flavours which they produce. So leaves can range anywhere from white to green to blue, and in this case red and purple. So red cabbage has become particularly popular in food processing, as it's quite well can be stored quite well for long periods of time, and it can be chopped quite well and incorporated into different products such as stir-fry mixtures. So most modern cabbage cultivars are what are called F1 hybrids. So that means that the crop that we eat is the product of a cross between two different cabbage lines. And so then this gives rise to an offspring which has what's called hybrid vigor, or to use the technical term, heterosis. So that crossing of two individuals together creates a superior offspring which has more uniform traits and has an increased growth rate. So this is obviously very advantageous for commercial productions. So they're advantageous in that way over what are called open pollinated cultivars, which are just general kind of cross pollinations between closely related individual plants. There are several different classifications of shape and cabbage characteristics within the Capitata group, and I'll go over a few of those now. So the first is the Wakefield type, or also known as the pointed cabbage. So it has this distinctive pyramidal shaped head, and they're quite early maturing types and generally cold tolerant and resistant to bolting. Then we have the Copenhagen type, which is a round-headed type with few wrapper leaves. So when I say wrapper leaves, it refers to the kind of leaves which grow around the rosette, around the head, and they tend to either cup over the top of the cabbage head, or in the case of the Copenhagen type, they're a bit more diffuse and fewer of them. It's an early maturing type, but it is susceptible to bolting. Next we have the flat Dutch type. So these have large, flat and solid heads. They have many wrapper leaves, so as you can see in this picture here, the leaves are kind of wrapping over and around the head of the cabbage. It has variable maturity according to the season. Next we have the Danish type. So these are medium-sized cabbages with solid heads and generally few wrapper leaves compared to say the Dutch flat type. It's a late maturing type with good shelf life and storage properties. And then we have the Savoy cabbage. So that's kind of characteristic because of its crinkled leaves, so they're quite thick and waxy. They're generally quite compact heads with many wrapper leaves around the head of the cabbage, and it's quite a popular stir-fry and processing ingredient, as it can be chopped and shredded and incorporated into those products. In terms of fertilizer requirements, cabbages grow well in most mineral and organic soils. Early crops can be planted on sandy soils because those warm up more quickly, and so they give the plant a bit of a boost in its early growth stage. Late crops can be planted on heavier soils, and those will be harvested in late autumn and early winter. The optimum pH range is around 6 to 6.5, but they can generally tolerate pHs as low as 5.5. So like all brassicas, cabbage has a high nitrogen requirement, and fertilizer is generally dictated by the soil type. Excessive nitrogen can, however, reduce the head density and promote leaf growth and what's called head splitting. So if the growth rate is too fast, the head of the cabbage will crack open, and that will make it unsaleable. And high nitrogen will also have the downside of decreasing the storage life as well. Like other brassica crops that I'll come on to in the next few screencasts, cabbage has a high requirement for boron and molybdenum. So these are minor trace elements, but they are important in all brassicas, and deficiency is quite common, and it can cause what's called chlorosis of the leaves. So this is a characteristic kind of yellowing of the leaves, and it also can cause conditions in the roots which inhibit nutrient uptake. Cabbages can be established easily from both direct seed and transplants. Transplanting is more common for cabbage in the northern and southern latitudes of the world, where the seasons are typically shorter. So transplants are ready after about 4 to 6 weeks of growth in a module house or a greenhouse. Early cultivars will mature in around about 85 to 90 days, whereas later cultivars will mature in about 110 to 115 days. Uniform growth at establishment of the cabbage crop is quite important to ensure that all of the heads are maturing at the same pace and can be harvested at the same time. They can be grown on raised beds to facilitate drainage. It's important that the crop doesn't become overly waterlogged. And spacing between the plants is kind of dictated by the different market requirements. So the closer the plants are together, generally the smaller the head of the cabbage will be, and the wider the spacing, the larger the head of the cabbage will be. So they're typically spaced between about 25 to 40 centimeters within rows. So in terms of irrigation requirements, cabbages require about 2.5 to 3.8 centimeters of water per week. This is there's an special need for irrigation on sandy soils, which are more free draining. Soil moisture content generally shouldn't fall below 50%, because if growth is uneven, yields will be reduced, and you'll also be susceptible to cracking of the heads when they're developing. So drought adversely affects the development and uniformity of the crop, so that's not very good for when it comes to harvesting them, as the heads might not be maturing all at the same time. And too much water as well can be detrimental to yields, and it's important again, that the crop doesn't become waterlogged, as this can cause problems with harvesting, but also can start promoting disease as well. So at harvest, the mature cabbage heads typically weigh around about 0.9 to 2.3 kilograms. The solid heading types of cabbage are well suited for long-term storage, and cabbages are typically harvested by hand and have the outer wrapper leaves trimmed in the field. So in this slide you can see that there's a team of workers going along a kind of specialized tractor which has this conveyor belt system on it, where the heads of the cabbage are put into the baskets, which then rotate around up and over the top of the tractor into the back, where another team is putting them into either storage bins, or they may be even packaging them there and then in the field. And this is common practice in a lot of countries, because it improves efficiency and reduces costs overall. So in terms of storage requirements, cabbages should be cooled quickly after harvest and stored in a high humidity atmosphere to prevent wilting and water loss. So the ideal storage temperature is around about freezing temperature, so 0 degrees C. And under these conditions, depending on the cultivar, they can be stored anywhere from about 1 to 6 months. There's a lot of work being done to breed and select new cabbage varieties for disease resistance during storage, because under those conditions they can start to develop different rots and fungal infections, which obviously is detrimental for the consumer and reduces the saleable amount of crop which has been harvested. In terms of its uses, cabbages have very diverse uses all over the world. Perhaps some of the most famous types are being used in pickling and being fermented in different foods. So sauerkraut is a kind of pickled cabbage, shredded cabbage, and also in Korea, for example, kimchi is very popular, which is a type of fermented cabbage. It's also used in coleslaws and different processing foods, and it's also been integrated quite a lot into prepared meals, such as ready to eat stir-fry mixtures. So in terms of production statistics, so this is FAO statistics for 2019, and unfortunately it doesn't distinguish between Brassica oleracea and Brassica rapa, which is Chinese cabbage, so those are both mixed in together here. But generally you can see that China is the world's largest producer of cabbage, both in terms of area grown and in amount of tons produced in a year. So over 34 million tons of cabbage is produced, and that will probably be a substantial mixture of both Brassica oleracea and the Chinese cabbage as well. India is also a very large producer, but there are also other big producing nations in Europe, such as Ukraine and Russia, and also in Asian countries such as South Korea, where, as I mentioned, kimchi is very, very popular. That will be a big growing region for Chinese cabbage, so that's likely to form the bulk of their production in a single year. And again, as you can see from this, they achieve a high tonnage per hectare in South Korea for cabbage. The UK, by contrast, has a very small growing area in relation to these other countries, but the amounts produced from each hectare is quite good, around 22 tons per hectare, which is kind of average, I guess, for cabbage production. And other nations are able to achieve production year-round because of their climate, whereas in the UK, production tends to be seasonal, even though it is technically possible to cultivate the crop year-round. There are only certain times of the year where it's feasible and appropriate to harvest the crop. So in summary, cabbages form heads of dense leaves that can be highly variable in colour, shape, size, texture and flavour. Cabbages can grow on a wide variety of soil types but have high nitrogen, boron and molybdenum requirement. Crops mature in around about 85 to 115 days, depending on the time of year, and spacing is dictated by the market requirements. Cabbage generally has a high irrigation requirement but can suffer adversely from prolonged wet conditions. Cabbages are mainly harvested by hand and must be stored appropriately to prevent spoilage during storage. Cabbage species and cultivars are produced all over the world and are important components for the horticultural economy.